Coming up on Legends.
Wherever you get an entry, you must always find where the exit is, because there must be an exit.
99% of those ministers who reach 60 years, they have an option of either retiring from service or getting a contract for 5 years. 99% of them opt for the contract.
Welcome to the final episode in this series of the Legends. Today we are privileged to have Reverend Dr. Robert Waihenya, the PCA Secretary General, and Reverend Francis Njoroge, the moderator of Nairobi East Presbytery and a former Deputy Secretary General of the PCA. Today we are going to cover issues that have been raised within this series by the retired ministers. So they are going to be responding and giving probably their personal and even official views on issues that have been raised in the process of meeting with the retired ministers. So gentlemen, welcome to the Legends program. Now, we've gone around and we have talked to quite a number of retired ministers and retiring ministers, and I must confess it has been a learning moment. Meeting with them and sharing with them, we got to learn a lot of things. However, there are some issues that, like I said, I would want you to respond to. And the first one maybe is an issue that is an ongoing debate. And from the teams that we have met, they are all divided down the middle. The possibility of raising the retirement age of ministers. What are your views?
Thank you so much. Yes, during the business committee, which happened recently, we agreed that we are going to have our ministers officially retire at 65 years. What occasioned that, we had 2 or 3 issues. Number one, every time a minister, or 99% of those ministers who reach 60 years, they have an option of either retiring from service or getting a contract for 5 years. 99% of them opt for the contract. What that means is that we start paying gratuity for them, which is a very expensive thing for the church. And again, since this gratuity is not something which is kept somewhere, most of them ends up losing the gratuity. So we agreed, because it is legally acceptable, that we allow them, we have the official retiring age to be 65, so that number one, it can be a little bit economical for the church, because for gratuity you pay 25% of their salary as gratuity, whereas when they're in normal service, you pay much less, about 12%. So that is one of the reasons why we had to agree that let the retirement age be at 65. The other reason is that it doesn't serve any purpose, because this minister, when you start, you are declared, now you're on contract, even your relationship with the banking institutions changes. You know, they don't consider you like you are employed person. So we agreed, let us treat these ministers well, let them retire at 65, so that once you hit 65, you get your pension and you go. The other thing, number 3, is that after you attain 60 years, you become pensionable. And if you continue contributing, your money doubles. When you are contributing after 60 years. So they will end up getting more money at the end of 65 years than they could have gotten at 60 years. So it is a win-win situation. They get more and they will retire with more money than it was before.
Reverend Njoroge, you are heading towards retirement. What is your opinion on that? Raising not now beyond 65, not just 65, as the just said.
I would say, first of all, retirement is a very, very noble area of a person's either working period. And I always say that wherever you get an entry, you must always find where the exit is, because there must be an exit. Our body structures are different.
Okay.
There are some people who at 65, they feel I've reached the end.
Okay.
But there are still others where at 65, they are still young and they can continue. But the best thing with the PCA and the retirement is one is only removed from the payroll, but the work as a minister continues to the end.
Now, there was a good feedback on the seminars that the PCA is nowadays doing and were not being done before in terms of preparing ministers that retirement is coming. But there are also some proposals or views of some of the retired ministers that those seminars should not just be done once, maybe 3 times before, to prepare them once and the second time and third time to be fully ready for retirement. What do you think, Mr. SG?
Well, I think that one is very important for us to have. Retirement is a process.
Yes.
It's a transition, and it's an area which you're not very sure of. Your retirement is not my retirement,
Yes.
and therefore, when we retire on different levels. And therefore, I think they are concerned of having more seminars, preparing them to take, the new law as retired ministers. I think it is very timely, and it's a high time the church took up the charge so that we can train our ministers, or we can seminar them on how to go about their retirement. Because I agree, 1-day seminar or 3-day seminar is not enough. It should be a process.
An issue that has been coming up is that we need to have a strong and facilitated retired ministers fraternal. What do you think about that?
At the level of our ministry, it's also important. There are many areas. We have got 57 presbyteries right now. And I'm hoping that some others are coming, so we'll be 60 in a very short time. And these ministers the retired ministers are in these presbyteries. And the presbyteries are not equal when it comes to economical endowment. So there are some ministers, retired ministers, where they are in some presbyteries, they are well catered for. Some presbyteries, they cannot do it. They are not able. So the problem that we need to, how to solve that problem is if we can be able to organize a well-established fraternal where they can come together once in a year, maybe, where they can encourage one another,
Yes.
where they can be able maybe even to set some fund somewhere. And they can help one another in one way or another.
Bwana SG, what is the position of the church?
Well, I think, number one, we need to acknowledge all of us following the line of retirement. All of us. We have formed the first team of the leadership of the retired ministers, and they now have their leadership. They have a chairman, and they have a secretary. And although it was slowed down because it was started during this time of COVID, shortly before the COVID, so it didn't become as vibrant as it was supposed to be. So we are looking forward at a time when this will be stronger. They'll be within the budget of the church, so that we have them. So it is a very important group, and the church should be assured that they'll be given their space in the church where they deserve, and they should be respected.
Okay.
And nobody should see them as a burden.
Now, somewhere along the way, as we were interviewing different personalities, we stopped by to talk with the spouse of one of the deceased ministers, Mrs. The wife of Reverend Dr. Goima, the late Reverend Dr. Goima. And she also expressed the views of the spouses of deceased ministers on the need to feel that they are still part and parcel of the church. The church values them. There can be also a fraternal of those spouses, the widows of the ministers. And she said that there was a time that there was a meeting and one of the past moderators talked to them. And their cry was only one, having some kind of health insurance. What do you think is we can do as a church?
Yeah, well, we should not ignore them, and they are part of us. Their spouses died serving this church. And it's true, the moment a pastor dies, the spouse, and especially if the presbytery is not strong enough, they are neglected, they are ignored, and they are forgotten, which is quite unfortunate. So we cherish the presbyteries because from the head office, most of these records and the shepherdship of these people are with the presbytery. So we need to come up with a policy, a very clear policy, so that the spouses of the deceased ministers are taken care of. At least they feel they still belong to the fellowship of the ministers. This again should be agenda which should be taken over by the national spouses fraternal.
Okay.
You know, they are best placed to bring up this agenda and to say, yes, you are taking care of us, but we have a group, because they are part of it.
Yes.
So they should have that agenda very well articulated, and we'll be able now to listen to what they are saying, and we have all the widows and widowers, of course, of our ministers covered, so that we take care of them.
Thank you so much. I think at this juncture we are going to take a commercial break and continue with the discussions after the break. Thank you.
Coming up after the break.
There are the presbyteries with many retired ministers, and of course, because they foresee there might be a problem, there is a tendency of when ministers near retirement, they tend to choose to retire in a presbytery which will be able to take care of them. And retirement is quite expensive.
Welcome back, and we continue the discussion with these two gentlemen, former DSG, Reverend Francis Njoroge, and the current Secretary General, Reverend Waihenya. In the process of the discussion, and you mentioned it somewhere along the way, there are some presbyteries that are doing very good work in terms of supporting of retired ministers and the spouses of the deceased ministers. Is there a way that we can push these other presbyteries that are not doing too well to benchmark with those other presbyteries?
I think that's something we can do. But since this is a beginning, we need first of all to know which presbytery is doing what, how are they doing. And this report will be gotten once we have a strong retired ministers fellowship. So it's a journey we must start together. We need to know before we come up with a policy how individual presbyteries treating their retired ministers, because there are some who are doing very well.
Yeah, I know.
Two, there are the presbyteries without any retired minister. Three, there are the presbyteries with many retired ministers. And of course, because they foresee there might be a problem, there is a tendency of when ministers near retirement, they tend to choose to retire in a presbytery which will be able to take care of them. And retirement is quite expensive. So once we get the data and we know how individual presbyteries are treating their retired ministers, after that we'll come up with with a clear policy. And the policy will also discuss about their distribution, because some presbyteries are definitely overloaded. So how do we distribute so that we don't have some ministers, a retired minister, who are suffering, others are enjoying, and then we also have some presbyteries which are label, but they don't have a single retired minister. This has always been my argument, that retirement of a minister is not like any other retirement. Because a minister, you cannot retire and go start a matatu business. You can't. You cannot retire and go start a workshop somewhere. You can't. Your training is different, your socialization is different, and even your position in the community will not allow. You can't. So the minister, let me use this word. A minister is mission parasitic. What I mean is that a minister must rely on the ministry. You can, because that is your training. You can't do anything. Let me tell you, and even those ministers who have tried to do business, they have failed terribly. That is not their line.
Thank you. Reverend Njoroge, you are a former Deputy Secretary General, and by extension, the person who was in charge of personnel at that particular moment in time. Somewhere along the visits and discussions, we sat down with a clergy couple, and the concern, and this I know is the elephant in the room, was the issue of the education of children and the way they are affected by the transfer of ministers. Is there something that you think the church should do to improve the situation so that the children are not affected by the transfer of the ministers?
The structures of a Presbyterian church, as it is today, is that you can be sent everywhere. And you have signed that document
Formula.
that I will go wherever the church wills. But things are changing, and they are changing, I think, for better. There has been 2 times or 3 times in this church trying to find out what can be done on the area of synods. And I would have maybe thought that synods would bring people closer to their homes. But the question of transfers, it has got 2 areas. Number 1, even when it has got a lot of demerits, it has got a lot of merits.
Yes.
That is where you gain a lot of experience over the many different areas that you are serving. Number 2, there is a question of where you want to settle at the final end. And that one, again, touches what the Secretary General talked about, retirement. Because, again, when you are reaching the time of retirement, and you want to settle in Nairobi, and you are in Nyeri, then it means even the transfer will bring you closer to that area. If you are not brought closer to that area, there is what we are calling the transfer of retired ministers, which is not very, it's not very much accepted by many and many presbyteries. The question of the equation of how you are transferring the ministers, we have tried, and I know even those who are in the office, many times we have been blamed that we are not even balancing the ministers as we send them. But you know, there are quite a number of interests, even when it comes to the transfers of the ministers.
Okay.
There was also another question of whether we can start the calling of the ministers. So that a parish can call a minister, and they can be with that minister as long as they are still working together. But again, with our setup, we saw that there are many areas we call mission areas, whereby they don't have that muscle that they can call a minister. So there will be some areas, while there are some areas enjoying the services of the minister, there will be others that will not be enjoying. They will be lacking ministers day in, day out. And therefore, it is a very tricky issue when it comes to the minister deployment, transfers, and even the question of the retirement.
Okay.
Again, we must give the freedom to that person who is retiring. And especially, where do you want to settle your family? That family should be somewhere where them will never regret that my father went to the ministry and now look at where we are heading. So if something is done so that they will always forge ahead, knowing that this is God's doing,
Yes.
I think that would be very, very good.
There is an issue that came up at some point in the discussions. The issue of the overwhelming responsibilities that are put on the shoulders of the office of the DSG and the office of the Secretary General. So there were feelings and recommendations that we can split up the office of the Deputy Secretary General and ensure that we have a professional human resources person. And also others feel that it is the high time that we implement the position of the executive clerk so that we can ease the burden on the shoulders of the Secretary General. What do you think, Mr. SG?
If anybody walks in my shoes, they will understand what it means to be the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa. They will understand what it means for one to be the Deputy Secretary General. The office is so overwhelming. You don't sleep, you don't rest, and every time you are solving so many issues, it is not easy. It is not easy. The structures which are serving the church today are the same structures which were serving the church when we had 5 presbyteries. So this calls for a new dialogue.
Okay.
As we now talk, because we've already started the debate of changing the constitution so that we can have a new structure. Now, this is my take because I don't want to be recorded that this is what the Secretary General said. But as a member of Presbyterian Church, and now somebody who is conversant with what happens in this office, I would feel like we need this office expanded.
Okay.
We can have, and we have a resolution, by the way, to have a HR person, because currently the HR is a DSG, which is too much for him. The other thing we need to do is to split the office of the Deputy Secretary General so that we can have several Deputy Secretary Generals, maybe 3, and then we have the Principal Clerk.
Okay.
So if we can split them, because those people who are in those offices are human beings. You need to take care of your health. And unfortunately, the record about the health of those who are in this office is not very good. We don't do very well because it is overwhelming. And nobody cares, by the way, nobody cares. So you're bombarded with issues, and you know, people are blaming you on everything, even what you don't know. And in a mess done from Kisumu, from Maralal, from Mombasa, you are the person who is answerable. So we need actually to, first of all, actualize what we have in the Constitution, having the office of the yes, Principal Clerk. And then we should go further, because even this one is now overtaken, so that we split the office of the Deputy Secretary General is too overwhelmed. The same case applies to my office. And you are still required to scrutinize and to go through all the documents. It is not doable. It is not doable. So we need to break down this office in our new constitution so that we can have more people. Let us not look at this office from financial perspective only, but let us look at it from the perspective of these are human beings. The church has grown. By then the church had few members. Now we are talking of over 4 million members. We are talking of huge institutions. We are talking of an international church, because PCA now, as we speak, and you know better, it is not just a Kenyan thing, it is an international thing, and therefore this office is very overwhelming. And when everything or anything happens, the first stop is with the Secretary General. So it is not even very good, and yeah, that is why we've had our personnel have health issues because of this kind of overloading.
But also even the office of the moderator. This church is too big now. We need either to look into whether we can have a vice moderator. We want to get into the office of the Secretary General, and we have 2 Secretary Generals. But even with that, we need to have one who is endowed with role, whereby we can be that person can be dealing with matters concerning legal issues. I know we have a legal person there, and congratulations, because you have done very well on that area. I would suggest right now, if we cannot be able to make even the synods, if the church would agree, the regions that are there, each region to have a deputy secretary general.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your input and words of wisdom. And I believe some of these things are quite timely, because if we are heading to the issue of reviewing our constitution, I think we should put some of these proposals in writing so that they can be considered during the review. Viewers, we thank God for the 2 gentlemen, and now we have come to the end of the first series of the Regents. We hope to continue at some point as we take a break for some time. The Lord bless you, and thank you for viewing. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.